Good morning, everybody. Good morning. My name is Jill Elwood. I am the Nonprofit Programming and Relations Manager here at the One Valley Community Foundation, where our mission is to connect people who care to causes that matter to build a better community. And one of the ways that we do that is by empowering and building capacity for our nonprofit sector. So thank you for being here and joining us today. It is fantastic to see so many familiar and friendly faces and some new ones as well. So thank you for taking the time to join us. Before we dive in, I would love to know who's in the room, and I think it's important for everyone to know who's joining us. So if you wouldn't mind, if you could take just a minute to rename yourself if your name in Zoom does not reflect your actual name. If you share with a spouse or a coworker, if you could rename yourself, we would greatly appreciate it. And B, if you could pop in the chat your name and organization, we would love to see who is joining us today. So again, name an organization in the chat and rename yourself to reflect your name. We will be having a breakout session later on, so it's always good to know who folks are talking to. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for introducing yourselves. I also want to thank, before we dive in and get started, our sponsor for today's session, which is First Security Bank. They've been the Nonprofit Cafe sponsor for 6 years now. We're so grateful for their partnership. And now it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our speaker today. I have been wanting to work with Karen for years. I heard her speak years ago, and she has been one of my favorite teachers and facilitators for years. So it is honestly like an absolute pleasure to get to bring Karen to all of you this morning. If you have not worked with her before, you are in for a surprising treat this morning. But Karen Lum is the owner of K-Lum Consulting. She calls herself a business co-pilot, but I can say from personal experience, she is also a nonprofit co-pilot. She supports leaders who are growing or elevating their organizations and teams. Her services include one-on-one business coaching, facilitated planning sessions, employee training, and program development and implementation. She has decades of experience in this work, and we are so grateful that she is volunteering her time to be with us this morning to share her time, her expertise, and her knowledge. So with all of that, I'm going to turn it over to Karen so we can dive into today's content.
Thanks, Jill. Good morning, everybody. I hope wherever you are, you're staying warm. It's been a rough week, hasn't it? For anybody who's in Montana, I feel like really getting tough around here, whether we like it or not. Well, I am just thrilled to be doing this. Jill, thank you to you and your team for inviting me. I am going to go ahead and get my slide deck going here. So let me do that really quick. And probably most of you have been on Zoom many times already, but just as a note, there's usually a toolbar as well as some options up in the top right corner to shift how much of the slide you're seeing versus how much of me you're seeing. So I'll let you decide what you prefer, but just want you to know that you have options there. Sometimes staring at slides for an hour can be a little intense for folks. So as Jill said, my name is Karen. I often go by K Lum, and I went by K-Lum before the whole thing of the Karens started, just for the record, but I was really happy to have a nickname after the past couple years of hell that the Karens have been through. So anyway, I'm a Karen against Karens, just for the record. I have been in training and curriculum design facilitation for 24 years. This year will be 25. I've been a people manager. I will say right up front, and you'll probably hear me say this again in the presentation at some point, I don't think, first of all, people management taught me more about myself. Like the only thing that's taught me more is parenting. But I do not think that being a people manager has ever been harder. So any of you that have teams that are leading teams, this segment is especially for you. And if you are someone who is not currently leading a team, but you hope to advance your career and be in leadership at some point, you are going to get ahead of the game today with this talk, okay? So I am what I call a business co-pilot. My clients are in the driver's seat, and my job is really to coach and to be in their corner and just to be a collaborative thought partner in many things. And then I also do a lot of workplace trainings. So lots of interactive, most of the time live trainings with teams around customer service, culture, leadership skills. Those are some of my favorites. I came to Montana in 2000 because I was on a fly fishing road trip. And I met a fishing guide. Okay, so let's just leave it at that. There's some good stories behind the scenes on that one, but we'll keep going. So goals for our session, just so you know where we're headed. And I also want to tell you up front, I mentioned to Jill, I've asked if she would go ahead and include a link or send out the slide deck to anyone who's participating today. So I want you to know that there's a lot of beefy information and a lot of tools and resources that I'm supplying. And I don't want you to feel worried that you have to take crazy rapid notes or feel stressed about any of it. You can have the slide deck, and so you'll have access to everything that's here. Okay. So as far as our goals for the session, I want to normalize, just kick off by normalizing the change that organizations have been experiencing, yes, since COVID, but more importantly, from a labor standpoint and in the world of business and nonprofits, the great resignation that has occurred. Then we're going to heighten our awareness and just our insight around human experience in the workplace, because this is where, of course, I'm biased because of what I do, but I believe that this is where all the gems of data are to help us be more effective and successful in our organizations. And then finally, I want to talk about some specific actions and efforts that you can take to contribute to a culture that employees will love, right? So one way to look at it is they won't leave us. Another way to look at it is they love us. And I tried to pack this presentation in not with only maybe recommendations, if you will, like, hey, you should think about doing this or doing that, but also here's some specific tools and things that you can leave today's session and activate on right away. Most of them you can do or at least get started with in 15, 20 minutes or less. Okay, so I've tried to be really thoughtful about that to make these things as practical as I can. All right, quick invitations to you just to actively participate. And really what that looks like in a session like this is being involved in the chat, chiming in, using your annotation tools. I'll talk about that a little more in a couple minutes, but be as involved as you feel comfortable being. Keep an open mind. So, I'm going to challenge you to think about some really specific things that your organization should be considering. And I would never share anything that I don't feel passionate about. So you're going to hear my passion and my conviction that you take some action around these things, and love for you to keep as open as a mind as you can, even though I think it's fair to say we are all experiencing in some ways some futility, in some ways some limitations, and those things can feel overwhelming at times. So I want you to know that I understand that. And also my job as a coach and a facilitator is also to try to inspire us to still, even with those challenges, figure out how we're going to get after it. Okay. Then love for you to aim towards your growing edge. So just think about where you individually, but then also as a team, can push your organization so that you can stay as relevant and engaging and meaningful as possible for yourselves, your stakeholders, and your amazing teams. And then just be as fully present as you can. It's super hard when you're on anything like a webinar, right? Your emails are still dinging and you're checking your phone, and God forbid there's a great reel on Instagram. So just do your darndest. If I have to, I can break out in some dance moves. So whatever it takes to keep you going. Okay, so let's get you engaged right now. What I would love for you to do, if you've never used the annotation tool on Zoom, you should have a black toolbar, and there should be a little button, because I'm sharing my slides, that'll say annotate. I want you to click on the annotation button. This is what it looks like, just so you can get a sense of it. It should be a black bar. And you'll click annotation and then choose a stamp. So there's a bunch of options in annotation. And if you choose a stamp, you should be able to go on my slide and stamp yourself right where your organization is represented from team size, from the standpoint of team size. All right. Okay, Dee got us started. Thank you for doing that.
I also
So if you'll
just want to note that depending on the version of Zoom you have, for some folks, the annotate button is actually at the top of the screen, and it says view options with a little drop down caret. So if you don't see that annotate pencil, go ahead and look for that view options at the top of the screen, and you should have annotate there. We always have different versions of Zoom pop up.
Yes, thank you, Jill. That's so good to know. I can't keep up with it, honestly. The only thing I'm proud of around Zoom is that I've never been Zoom bombed. So let's keep it going strong. Knock on wood. Okay, this is helpful to just to see. So we have some smaller teams. That's great. You guys are finding your way, whether it's a stamp or something else. Love it. It's all good. just gives me a general sense of the size of your teams, which does matter, right? Because hopefully, if you've got 20 more employees, 21 employees or more, you've got a few leaders on your team. That's my hope, is that we are not having a flat organization at that point, even at 11 to 20. My hope is that you have a couple levels of leaders on in your organization. Okay, I'll just give it a second more to see if I can get a sense of where we stand. Definitely larger organizations, and then still a good number of folks that have very small teams. So that's wonderful. Oh yeah, and you can totally drop it in chat too if you need to. Okay, looking good, my friends. Okay, we're gonna go to the next slide. I have one more of these for you, so you get to practice your stamping. Okay, these are a little faster than polls usually, so I like to do a few of each. Okay, so now, Jill, let's see. Can I just clear it out? Clear all drawings. There it goes. Okay, so I would love for you now to just tell me your specific role. Are you a leader that has direct reports? Are you a leader with no direct reports? Or are you currently not in a leadership role, so that I can get a sense of how many leaders of people I have in the session today? Yeah, you guys are figuring this out. Okay, awesome. Lots of leaders with direct reports. Wonderful. I have so much good stuff for you today. I also will say, as I start kind of introducing some of the concepts and practical advice, that even if you are not in a leadership role, hopefully you're here because you know that you are still very much of influence in your organization's culture. So there are still opportunities. If your leaders are not on the call today, in the session today, and you hear something that you would like your organization to be doing, you can blame it all on me. Calum suggested, and then you just go for it and make your pitch. Okay. Okay. Lots of leaders with direct reports and a couple folks that are not in leadership yet. Okay. Here we go. We're going to clear that baby out. And we'll go to our next slide if it lets me. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it gets stuck. All right, let's see. I'm going to stop sharing. Sometimes this is what you have to do. Just make Zoom fall in line. All right, how are we doing? Are we back to, we're back. Okay, so I want to share a couple stats with you related to things that we're seeing since the Great Resignation. The other way that you can look at it is basically since 2021, okay? So between January 2020 and January 2021, 1.6 mothers took leave or quit jobs. Why does this matter in a nonprofit presentation? You all know the answer, right? Somewhere between 73 and 75% of the employees at nonprofits are women. So this is a big deal. Overall, in 2022, we saw 50 million, over 50 million people quit their jobs. Lots of people also changed industries, a very high number, 60% in the US of individuals who were surveyed said, I changed out of my industry into a different one. The thing I want you to keep in mind is there is a very high percentage of regret from folks that left their jobs. The highest regret is actually in Gen Zers. Okay, so just important things to know as you think about the landscape of labor and your team and also the future of your organization. I think this is also really interesting. I'm going to talk a lot about engaging your people, right? Because that's part of how we create an active culture. 73% of disengaged employees said they were actively seeking out new employment, whereas only 37% that said, I'm actually really engaged in my culture and my workplace. Only 37% of those folks said they were seeking out new employment. So this engagement piece you're going to hear as a theme, super critical. Okay. 9 out of 10 Gen Zers changed industries. So that's a very high number as well, just to keep you posted on that. I will also say I have a lot of data here for you and some tips and suggestions in my last slide. is a list of sources of every single source that I use for my presentation in case you want to dive in on any of these details or read any of these studies yourself. Okay, a couple other things to note. Men with children under 5 right now, their requests for benefits from their employers are starting to mirror what we have typically seen from women. Okay, so what we are guessing about, and it's only a guess, is that the younger generation of men are starting to get more involved in caretaking and all of that. And that is changing what they are asking for and expecting from their employers. So that's important to note as well. 72% of our, remember, Gen Z is our youngest generation with adults in it, right? So our young 20 somethings, they are stating that they want to talk about mental health at work. In 2021, 65% of employees that were surveyed were pondering the place that work should have in their lives. Nothing surprising about that. How come that happened? Because we all got still. We all had some space and time, right? To pause, get quiet, think about, how much do I want to be working? What do I want the role of work to be in my life? Do I want to be doing something that's passion driven or something different? Last bullet here, 40% of parents and guardians are saying we want mindful manager training for our leaders. Why are we hearing that? We're hearing that because individuals want compassionate leaders. That's really what they're telling us, right? And so that's something that we need to think about as we're making decisions about, development of our people in particular, our leaders. Okay, couple more details for you. Virtual employees, they are stating their top challenges: loneliness, isolation, that's probably not surprising, and also lack of movement is happening for a lot of people that are virtual. We're just getting zoned out on our computers, working for long periods of time. Research shows that employees are valuing flexibility as much as a 10% pay raise. And obviously this is a stat. So for some people, they would actually state it's more important. Others would say less important. I think we can all agree that our talent shortfalls, just what's happening in the labor market, is probably going to continue for some time. And then 80% of nonprofit leaders that were surveyed, there's actually a great survey out right now. It's a 2023 survey from the Nonprofit HR Survey, and that link is on the last slide. Those folks are saying we have no official retention strategy in place right now. I'm concerned about that because that number is very, very high. Retention strategy is really leadership sitting down and talking about what do we need to do to keep our people here, content, happy, engaged, feeling like they're doing meaningful stuff while they're here. Okay, what we're seeing in this 2021 study, top 3 reasons that most commonly reported folks are leaving nonprofit organizations. Okay, and this is only if they voluntarily left. Finding better opportunities elsewhere, my guess is that probably has a lot to do with pay. That's why that one's in the top 3. Invisible career path, right? So I've got a lack of opportunity, career growth, or a lack of professional development. And then also in the top 3, this theme again, disengagement or dissatisfaction with the culture or the organization. So there are at least 2 of these that we can deeply and quickly impact. The first one is a little trickier because some of us have budgets that are tight and we may struggle on that front. But I would say in that piece of found better opportunities, it's probably not all related to money, right? Some of it also may be fitting into that career path piece, opportunities to make a big enough impact, things like that. Okay, last background slide that I want to give you. Just want us all to be on the same page about some of this so that you understand why I'm going to make the recommendations that I'm going to make. So Gallup does lots of surveys and studies, as you probably know. The latest one is saying one of the most important discoveries they made when they looked at all this different employment information is that a manager or a team leader on their own, just that role, accounts for 70% of the variance in team engagement. If you have an engaged team, 70% of that credit goes to the manager or team leader. So you've probably heard the phrase before that people don't leave places, they leave managers or leaders, right? This would reinforce that quite a bit. So I think this is an interesting paradigm shift to just take a look at. I would say the only one that I'm going to debate that I have a bit of a bias around as a business coach, working with lots of leaders and lots of different teams right now, is that money still very much matters. And so I would say purpose matters too, and especially in a nonprofit sector. But I'm not in total agreement that we can take paycheck off the list, right? I think that it is a huge reason that we struggle to keep people right now, and also a huge reason why people changed industries. So keep that in mind. Aside from that, I do tend to agree with what is here. So take a look at this really quick. You're probably familiar with the fact that lots of annual review processes are shifting, right, and changing so that we're having more ongoing feedback cycles and things over time. So that's important to know as well. Okay, let's dive into the meat now that we have this all as some background. And then also remember, just don't be shy. If you have questions for me as I'm going, I'm happy to stop at any point. Every trainer and facilitator has to have slides, but I'm also more than willing to answer anything as we go. And then we'll have some Q&A time at the end too. All right, so I'd love for you to jump into the chat. And now let's personalize this for the folks that have joined this morning. What are the biggest challenges and changes that you are noticing in your work culture since 2020? You can either pop it in the public chat, or if you feel more comfortable not having your name mentioned, you can send me a private chat message as well. You just click on my name and that'll send me a direct message. But I would love to just hear biggest challenges or changes that you're noticing in your work culture in the past couple years. Take a second to do that now. Excellent. Thank you for popping your thoughts in here. Yeah, make sure after you've shared whatever you'd like to share, take a look at what you're seeing here. There's some really important things. A few private messages that I'm getting: entitlement and the expectation to have an unearned title. Yes, this is a big challenge. I would say another challenge that relates to that is leaders trying to learn how to lead and guide and build trust in lots of different generations and how that works, right? Our values are sometimes different. Our communication styles are sometimes different. Our expectations, same way. Okay, great. Thank you for popping all these in here. So many things. And definitely there's this piece around cost of living, right? That's why, I mean, I love some Gallup polls, but that one, I just think paycheck is still hugely important, and especially in our area right now. Okay, feel free to keep some things popping in there and I'll keep reading them as I go. So you've got some great points here. You know, you're living this experience yourselves. These are some of the things that we're noticing are making a difference and are important. And these are some of the things that are going to influence the recommendations I give you today. So employees are likely to be underreporting their lack of well-being. I have included a suggestion to the Dare to Lead podcast. If you've never listened to it, it's wonderful. It's one of Brene Brown's podcasts. And there's a fairly recent 2-part series that is Simon Sinek, Adam Grant, and Brene Brown all talking about what's happening over the past couple years and what they're seeing in all the different companies and organizations that they're working in. And this was a part of their conversation, that the sense is that folks are probably underreporting their lack of well-being. I also noticed that if you manage anyone you would consider a high performer, typically high performers tend to be some of the last individuals to recognize burnout or a lack of well-being, because they have such resilience that they can handle a lot before they start to really take it on and feel it. So really watch those folks especially. Workplace flexibility is a top consideration. We do not expect this to change. You are going to see that in the years to come, this continues to be a huge part of what we all need to be adapting to. We're also finally finding that engaged and present managers are actually having success with retention. So again, in many of your organizations, you may just have a cap on salaries and wages, and there's only so much you can do there, which must feel incredibly frustrating. And I'm not saying that out of every 10 employees, if you just can make sure you engage them, all 10 are going to stay. But if we've got 10 employees and we can keep 7 of those 10, because we do this well, it's worth doing. Okay. I would say even if we can keep 5, it's worth doing. And then hybrid employees are actually tracking as most happy and least stressed. This is interesting. Okay. So a hybrid employee, just for a definition, is someone who is in the office a few days a week and virtual a few days a week. Those are the folks that are saying, I'm the happiest and the least stressed. Now, of course, there are factors, right? If I had young children at home, even if I was hybrid, I don't know that I would rate myself as least stressed, right? So there are always factors to consider, but important things to note. All right, so based on all that I've shared, these are some of the things that I'm going to talk us through. 4 important areas that I want you to put more focus on, or at least invite you to put more focus on. The first one, some specific ways to engage as often as possible and authentically. Secondly, I want you to think about providing more proactive wellness programming and opportunities for your people. Don't wait until the demand gets really high for it. Think about how you can be as proactive as possible. I want you to determine where you can embrace flexibility in your organization, and it's going to be different for every single one. And then I also have a whole segment on learning how to tap into the motivation and keep the motivation high, and what I call keep the fire lit within, like in the belly of everybody, that they feel conviction and they know their why and they feel motivated every day or as often as possible. We're going to cover the first 3 today in this segment, and then I am going to actually record a bonus segment for you that is self-paced that you can watch anytime, all about tapping into motivation, because there's a whole bunch of good nuggets there and we're not going to get to all of it today. All right, so let's talk about managers engaging often and authentically. Here's what we know. We know that a top driver of contentment is employees feeling seen and known by the people that they work with and for. Okay, this is part of what connects to happiness, is actually that I feel seen and known by those I work with and work for. This is important. Secondly, we know trust and respect is built through gestures of genuine care and connection, not necessarily big, huge events and big to-dos, but more on a regular basis in consistent ways. And then lastly, I want to encourage us as leaders to check in about some of the myths that we may be buying into around micromanagement. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what I mean here as far as these myths go. I hear quite often leaders will say, I don't want to engage too much. I don't want to bother people, right? Especially remote people. Like, how do I check in on my remote people and not come across as a micromanager, right? Sometimes the myths we tell ourselves, my high performers will be offended if I either lay out my expectations or check in too often. If my staff isn't clear, they'll come to me, right? So I don't need to keep asking and checking in and making outbound efforts, because my staff will come to me if they aren't clear. And then lastly, if I'm clear about my expectations, it could come across as condescending, or it could feel like micromanagement. So very quickly, I just want to tell you my little soapbox about micromanagement. I believe that when an employee or a person experiences micromanagement, it is only because the person that is trying to connect, share information, direct, or line the person out is poorly assessing the person's skills and experience. So if I'm new at a role in your organization and I've never done a certain thing before, and you line me out with really specific expectations, exactly how to do it, and you check on me pretty regularly, I am very unlikely to experience that as micromanagement because I'm going to say, oh my gosh, I have the support I need. I'm being set up for success. If you want me to hit a home run here, you got to show me how to do it, right? Rules of engagement. However, if I have done this activity or project, this set of steps time and time again, I'm highly experienced at it, and you were to apply those same strategies and tactics with me, my experience of that would be that your style of managing me isn't matching what I need for this particular piece of work. Okay. So I really want you to let go of the myth that you're bothering your people when you're checking in, when you're making outbound efforts, when you're staying in touch with the folks on your team. I think we get in lots of trouble assuming that's the case, and we're too hands off much of the time. Okay, I have a little video that I want to show you. I'm going to see if I can get into it and put my mic on so that you guys can hear my computer audio. So hang on a second. This is a little video of Simon Sinek. Jill, can you see Simon's big face on the screen? Okay, good. Hopefully you guys will hear this fine. So he's talking about how to use empathy as a manager when we're talking to individuals on our team. And it's short and sweet. It's 1:22 and it is chock full of goodness.
Empathy at its foundation includes curiosity. One of the examples I like to share of what empathy looks like in the workplace is, here's a fairly normal scenario. A manager walks into somebody's office and says, hey, your numbers are down for the third quarter in a row. We've had this conversation before. If you don't pick up your numbers in the fourth quarter, I don't know what's going to happen. An organization that embodies empathy, that same circumstance sounds different. It says, somebody walks into the office and says, hey, your numbers are down for the third quarter in a row. We've had this conversation before. Are you okay? What's going on? I'm worried about you. There's the assumption that the person is not the problem, but they have a problem. And if we can give them a safe space for them to tell us what they're going through, personally or professionally, then we can help them. At least we can be there for them to support them. And so, you know, empathy is core to what good leadership looks like. It's seeing people as people and recognizing that we all have personal issues and struggles and insecurities and egos and ambitions, and we're just messy balls of human beings. And you know, and fundamentally, leadership is not about the results. Leadership is about taking care of the people who are responsible for the results. It's a human job. That's what leadership is.
Isn't that so good? Oh, I love me some Simon. Okay, that's what leadership is. So imagine that this is all about, there's not a problem with the person, right? Like the person has something going on. And frankly, I think those of us in nonprofits are probably far ahead of the game in our organizations of being compassionate and having this come through. But I will still say that we are in a time where we have probably very rarely been more stressed. And so I still think that this can be really challenging for us to do on a regular basis, right? So anyway, one of my favorite videos, I love that little snippet from Simon. Okay, so how do you practically do this, leaders? One of the things I want to encourage, if you are not already holding one-on-one meetings with your people, one-on-one meetings, and here's the key, one-on-one meetings that are not about projects, tasks, milestones, where are you at with this thing and that thing, but specifically one-on-one meetings that are focused on performance, on building trust and rapport, enhancing your relationship, and creating some accountability along the way. So here's my model for an effective one-on-one meeting. Again, I'm not saying that you don't also need to talk about projects and status of things, right? But in my book, that's a separate conversation. And the meetings we really need to be having and that we're craving as employees, checking in about is the employee aligned with their manager? Is the employee aligned with the organization? Performance, I want to hear really specific things. Where do you think I'm slaying it, boss? And where are there places I could turn the dial up or down a little bit on my approach, my style, my skill set? If I have someone who's pretty experienced in their role as a manager, I actually love to ask them to also come to the meeting prepared to say, here's where I feel like I'm killing it, and here's what I think I could do better, so that they can also, give us some feedback about their own performance. And then support. What do you need from me to be set up for success? Right? This is the model of servant leadership, that we are here to be of service to the people who work for us. Okay, and with us. Okay, alignment, performance support. There is not one way as far as cadence of these meetings, just so you know. I'm happy at any time in the Q&A, or you can always email me or contact me separately, but I'm always happy to talk to you about, given the size of your team, what they do, lots of different factors. I would give you different coaching suggestions about how frequently you need to have these meetings. I don't believe that it's all one and the same. Some managers do one-on-one meeting with this as the focus once a month. Other folks that have new employees are doing it every week, right? So there's lots of different ways to do it. Okay, so we are going to go into breakouts. This is the only breakout session we're going to do. I really encourage you to participate. I know you're probably here to let me do all the heavy lifting and you just want to hear my thoughts, but I really want you to talk to each other. So there's a lot here. Jill, I would love it if you could pop these questions in the chat too. I believe they can access the chat when they're in breakouts, so they know what they're talking about. You don't need to answer all these questions. I just want to give you some things to discuss about what's happening in your organizations. How are your leaders engaging with employees currently? How are employees engaging with each other? Are your conversations that you're having proactive or reactive? Are we only coming together when we've got something that we need to coach around constructively? Right? What's the cadence? How frequently are you meeting with folks? What are the topics that you discuss? And then how are you doing with asking thoughtful questions that provides you with insight? So really quickly, before you go in your breakouts, I just got to say this about insight. If we don't stay curious, we're not going to ask good questions. And if we don't start asking really good questions, we are going to miss out on insight, or what I call little gems of data from our employees that help us understand what they need most, how to engage with them most. So I really want you to talk about that a little bit. Okay, so hopefully we're going to go into rooms that are about 3 people. I want to keep it really small because I'm only giving you 6 minutes. So don't waste any time, jump in, maybe just your name really quick, the organization you're with, and then everybody take a minute or 2 to just say, here's what's happening in our organization around meeting and connecting with our people. I hope those of you that went into a breakout were able to have a good conversation, just to touch base about the cadence of your meetings, how often you're connecting with employees, how you're doing that. And I think really it's just an opportunity for us to pause long enough to ask ourselves, where could we be doing this better, right? Where can we turn the volume up on this a little bit more? And what are the meaningful ways that we need to do this, right? You may have some strengths in this area in your organization, but there also still may be some places where you can level up. And I would say for most of us, there are, right? So as you return, I wanted to put up this slide here with 4 of my favorite books focused on leadership and supporting leaders. If I had to only pick one, I think Dare to Lead's gonna get my vote. It's just such a fascinating read about human experience in a work culture. And there's so many powerful takeaways. Simon Sinek, who was on that short little video clip that I showed you about empathy in the workplace, wrote a great book called Start with Why. It's actually a 3-book series, really. And the first book is Start with Why, How Great Leaders Inspire Everyone to Take Action. So I encourage you to think about that one. Heather Younger wrote a book fairly recently, actually, called The Art of Caring Leadership. Also one of my favorite books, and another book that I gift quite regularly to leaders in my life. And then Coactive Coaching, this book is a little more technical in nature, has a lot of conversations and dialogue examples. Some of it is written more for someone who's in a coaching profession, but I have to tell you that if you're a leader who has a good sized team, or you really struggle when you're in one-on-one conversations to have meaningful dialogue, to be able to turn up the volume on your own intuition and situational awareness about what's needed next, this book has a lot of very practical dialogue examples, and that's one of the reasons that I like to share it. So just want to let you know that these 4 books are incredible. And Luisa, I appreciate this note about Simon having a great podcast. I did not include Simon's podcast in my list. I put two of my most favorite, and of course, Simon is up there. So A Bit of Optimism is Simon Sinek's, one of Simon Sinek's podcasts. And then I wanted to share these two as well. There's a Dare to Lead specific podcast and another one by Adam Grant called Work Life. And Dana's sharing in the chat, there's also another Adam Grant podcast called Rethinking. It is also very well done. If I had to pick one of Adam Grant's for leaders, I would specifically choose Work Life, but really encourage you guys. And I would just say, jump in the chat and share any of your favorite podcasts. Like we're all always looking for great things to listen to. So hopefully I can share a few more resources too that feel bite-sized and doable for those of you that want to level up a little bit. Okay, and there will be time at the end to ask me also specific questions about leadership, managing people during this time. I'm happy, like bring it on. It doesn't matter how challenging the question is, I'll do my best. Okay, so now let's talk about this other piece, the second component, providing proactive wellness programming. And although some of you may already be doing some things and really have this on your mind, I wanted to emphasize it because we are definitely seeing that this is an area where we need to level up in our organizations. Most importantly, I want to make the statement that the impact of unwell employees on our organization, on our mission, and on our larger community is significant. We are seeing this with mental wellness, right? But also just health of our people. If you think about it, when our people are not well, they are missing work. They are tense, stressed, they're inefficient. They struggle with proactivity and productivity. We struggle to connect effectively. We get disenchanted, burned out, disconnected from what we're doing, right? So really thinking, whether we like it or not, we can be in the camp of, hey, this isn't for us to solve. We can't do it all. We need our people to take care of themselves outside of work. But I think we also need to face the reality that things are shifting about expectations of how much our organizations do need to be considering us as whole people, and also, frankly, how much time we are spending at work, right? There are only so many hours on the either side of work to be focused on our wellness when we're not working. Okay, and the second piece, I just want to encourage you to think about how you can build wellness opportunities and education into the paid workday. And I also want to just say it doesn't always have to be something huge. It doesn't have to be a massive campaign or undertaking. There are many small ways to do this. Now, like I promised you, I'm not going to throw out these big, broad suggestions and not give you specific tactical things you can do. So let's talk about this in just a second. So really quickly, I would love to know what you all are noticing about the health and well-being of employees, peers, and yourself. Jill's going to throw up a quick poll, and hopefully we have it set up so you can check any of these that apply. Look over this list in the poll. Which, if any, of these are you noticing in your teammates, your direct reports, or yourself? Take a minute and check all that apply. This will give us a good sense of our specific nonprofit community and how we're doing in these areas. If you haven't yet, jump in and fill out this poll for me just so we can get a sense of what you're seeing most of in your organization. A few of these are definitely signs or indications that we're struggling with wellness, but we're also seeing some other things, right? Like an increase in self-advocacy or healthy boundaries, compassion. Like there are some positives that have come out of COVID as well.
Looks like the answers are slowing down, so I think we may have captured everyone. So I'll go ahead and share those results out.
Thanks, Jill. Okay, So we're definitely seeing more stress and anxiousness and more folks feeling tired and exhausted. I relate to that. Mhm. I'm happy to see a good amount of compassion. I think the self-advocacy one is really tricky for us as leaders to navigate. We care a lot and we want people to speak up and say what they need. And also, we have an organization to run and we have to be able to handle and do a lot, right? So this is very tricky. And I think my quick advice, even though I don't have a lot of time to coach you on this, but anyone who's struggling with this piece around self-advocacy, um, keep in mind that one of the best tools for coaching around this is to work on acknowledgement, not commiseration, right? Because when we commiserate with people, when we're trying to help them feel heard, we kind of take the buffalo and run them right off the ledge. We get them all amped up about the stuff that's not working for them or what they need more of. And so making sure that people feel acknowledged and then also helping them understand any boundaries or limitations that exist and asking for compassion back is usually one of the most helpful things you can do if you're dealing with high levels of self-advocacy and feeling like you've got a lot of limitations on what you can make happen. Okay, I'm going to keep moving for sake of time, doing a little time check for myself. So I wanted to provide you with some suggestions about wellness opportunities. There's a couple things locally that I wanted to point out to everyone that you may or may not be aware of. You all are incredibly busy trying to run your organizations. And so part of my job as a coach and trainer is to, kind of cherry pick some of the best things that are happening in our community or resources that I know about and make it really easy for you to access them. So Soul Trust Ignite is a small business owned by a woman named Hannah Atwood. And she does meditations, movement events. She's all about supporting people to get grounded, centered, connect to self in order to be more effective in their lives. And Hannah can do online events. She could also come to your office and lead a workshop or a lunch and learn or something like that. Molly Casto is another individual in this community that I have seen do events and facilitate yoga, also meditations that can be short and sweet. I've been a part of meditations of hers that have been a few, like maybe 15 minutes long and still have felt restorative. And of course, there are tons of other people doing this type of stuff, but I wanted to give you a couple of folks that I have experience with that I think could do something in an organization very easily and quickly and really customize it to work with your team. I also have recently learned about the Calm app actually having memberships for businesses. And so if you're not familiar with the Calm app, I'll let you research that on your own, but essentially gives you a bunch of different series of meditations and different kinds of programming to support you in feeling centered, calm, and well in your life. And there are actually memberships that are quite reasonable. Like I was surprised it depends on the number of people on your team, but like for as little as $150 to $200 a year, and it goes up, of course, the size of your team, you can give your employees access to kind of some self-paced opportunities to support their well-being. And I really do think these things can matter. So just want to let you know about them. Told you I had a bunch of good suggestions for you. So here are some small things. Most of these are fairly small. Maybe a few are a little bigger, but most of these are pretty small, right? I wanted to point out that what is included in wellness is also financial wellness. So thinking about creating opportunities for your people to learn more about how to care for their money, how to feel more comfortable with money, how to save money. It's crazy, the stats about employees that have opportunities for things like an HSA account or 401ks or what have you, that maybe sit down with an HR person at some point and hear about it from a paperwork standpoint, but the number of folks that have HSAs that aren't actually using them, that just aren't thinking about their financial wellness on a regular basis, and they may feel overwhelmed by it. They may feel they're not ready to talk to a financial planner of some kind. So the other suggestion I had was cover the cost of one session with a financial planner. Find a financial planner you love, work with them on, hey, can I pay you for a block of time and give the opportunity to all of my people to have some time with you confidentially to just talk about where they're at and also help people not assume that they're not ready to think about and be empowered around their money. If you think about it, our financial wellness is a huge pain point and stressor for many, many people. This is why this piece around our paycheck starts to lure us away to other opportunities. We're stressed about the cost of living. Okay, standing desks, ergonomic equipment helps, right, with wellness. Meditation breaks, lunchtime yoga from time to time. Again, you know your people, so you do the things that make sense on this list. Even if you picked one thing off this list, that would be great. Encouraging walking meetings, maybe not today. Set up health and wellness improvement committees. So empower some other people in your organization to lead the charge so that you as leaders don't feel the burden of all of that. A wellness stipend, so something that could be used to qualify towards like some portion of your gym membership being paid. Or I know there's some organizations that are like, we'll give you the stipend. You have to show us that you purchased a ski pass or a gym membership or whatever, and then we reimburse you a stipend for some portion, right? Obviously, equity among your employees is important. And so I'm all about giving multiple options as opposed to we have a deal with this gym and you can go to this gym, right? Because that's some people, that's not what they want to do. Send out an employee well-being survey, right? Which can be short and sweet. You can use something like SurveyMonkey or Typeform and just ask some questions to understand where people are at. And you can always do that anonymously if that feels safer for your people. Couple other things, on-site chair massage, order a healthy lunch into the office on a regular basis. And I guess what I would add to this is if you have a big event coming up or it's an extra stressful week, you have a department that's maybe trying to get something launched, or you notice that folks had a tough week last week, order a luncheon, right? Have a nice taco bar. There's so many awesome caterers that really are quite reasonable and would love to do this for your office. Or of course, you could always send somebody out to set it up. And then research programs that maybe your employees don't know about where they can get cost savings, right? This is a way to take care of them and do some of the work for them. And then also think about wellness content, right? How can you feed out to your employees better information about how to take care of themselves? And again, I think this is actually a great one to have, you know, a wellness committee that maybe pulls and gathers some good tidbits. There's so many websites and blogs that you can just literally repurpose and send out to your people. Okay, my friends. So now we're going to move on to this last piece around flexibility. This is huge right now. Our people and ourselves, we all want flexibility. Frankly, because of the pace of our lives and the intensity of all the roles we're playing, we need flexibility. Okay? The expectations around this are not going anywhere. They're here to stay. So the sooner we get on board and frankly, as proactive as possible about thinking through what we're willing to do within our own organization, the better. I would encourage you to have some leadership discussions on the topic of a flexible work environment and ask yourselves, what can we be doing within the context of our mission and the work that we need to get done and the way we need our work to get done? And then I also want to suggest pulse surveys. I think pulse surveys are a wonderful way to stay in tune with what your employees are valuing, what they need most. And also, I mean, this kind of falls into the category of wellness as well, how they're doing. I have some suggestions about flexibility here on this next slide. So here's a whole bunch of different ways to think about how we can be flexible at work. We can actually have flexible schedules, right? Related to how we structure our work week. Jill, you shared an interesting example that I didn't know about. I think maybe it was actually Jennifer who mentioned it to me, but she said something about Fun Fridays or something like this, right? Where at One Valley during the season of spring and summer, which is quite short, and then it sounds like maybe near the end of the year, as there's lots of holidays and things going on, that you have half days on Friday. So it's not all year round. It's during these specific chunks of time when we want to give people a little more opportunity to have some daylight of personal time and flexibility to enjoy even maybe a long weekend, right? So that's an example of, you could call that flexible schedule or flexible hours. So thinking, flex hours a lot of times are just that not everyone has to show up at work at the same time and leave at the same time. Again, every organization structure different. This has a lot to do with the work and the tasks that you have. But I would challenge us to really let go of whatever we've done before and start thinking about what we need to do going forward. And then, of course, there's flexible PTO. Even some organizations choose to have unlimited PTO. All of these come with, problems we have to solve, but I still think it's worth it to get in the game on this stuff. Flexible locations. So this has more to do with where do I work from and how much flexibility can you give me and still feel good about the productivity of what we're doing. And then flexible positions. So this is really job sharing, right? Where we've got, I do this type of role or that type of role, depending on my skill set, what I'm wanting to do, and how we can use maybe multiple part-time folks. Okay. So different ways to think about flexibility. And there may be some others. If any of you know of some other ways to be flexible in the workplace, don't be shy about throwing in the chat. I'm sure everyone would appreciate knowing if there's anything that I have left out. I tried to cover some of the main ones. I wanted to challenge you with this activity. This is more of a takeaway. This isn't something that makes sense to do in just a few minutes on a webinar, and it needs some thought. Again, you'll get my slide deck if you want it, and so you'll get the list of questions here. But for leadership teams, this is an exercise that I highly recommend you do before Q1 is over. So you have about a month. List out the current aspects of flexibility in your organization. What are the ways in which we're already flexible? Have these aspects of flexibility been clearly expressed and documented? So this is important because sometimes we as leaders are like, oh yeah, we're doing this and we're doing this and we're super flexible about this, but only some of our people know about it, right? So this number 2 is really important. Then 3, is there room to be clearer? Like, are there ways in which we can make sure everyone knows the places in our organization where we are flexible? And then step 4 is brainstorming. What are we missing? Like, what other elements should we be considering? And number 4 might be a great place to also do some type of a pulse survey to just get feedback from your employees about what they'd like. I have to say, sometimes in coaching, when I recommend this, I have leaders that go, I don't even want to ask because my people are going to ask for things we can't do. Okay, here's my soapbox on that, my friends. Whether our people are telling us what they're wanting, what's working for them, what's not working for them, they're still thinking it. Okay, so you asking is the only way that you're going to get the insight to know what they want. And if you don't know what they want, you don't have a chance in heck of improving it. Okay, so don't be afraid to ask. You can make sure your people know. We may not be able to do everything, but we surely want to hear what matters to you so that we can prioritize those things. And then the last step is just to, next to each area where you might be able to be more flexible, what are the steps that we need to take to investigate it or to think about it actually happening in the future? Okay, I've got a couple more minutes with you. So I just want to share, for anyone who's not familiar with a pulse survey, I thought it might be helpful just give you some examples of some of the questions that I create for my clients when I'm launching pulse surveys for them. So I have quite a few clients that prefer that the pulse surveys and things of this nature are handled by someone outside of their organization. It feels safer to their employees. And so I'm the only one that receives all the feedback. And then I create essentially a report for the organization where they can review and look at all the results. And it's still anonymous. It's not like I know who filled anything out, but they still prefer to have me set it up for them. So you could use some of these questions or all of these questions, right? Everything from are you happy at work to whether you feel valued and appreciated, what's feeling fulfilling to you about your job, or is it? I think this question, how frequently do you feel stressed or burned out due to work? Using that due to work is pretty important there. So you know if they're allocating their stress towards work in some way. I have a couple others here just to give you some more examples. And again, a pulse survey can be 5 questions long, right? 3 to 5 questions, super fast. You could do it in a Google poll as well. Or you could do a more extensive pulse survey using any of these questions. How satisfied are you with leadership, benefits, work environment, right? And again, these are just examples. So things to think about. If you've never done one of these, I would really encourage you to think about doing it in the first half of this year so that you can gain some more information from your people. And I would also say, even if you think you have a very safe and open culture, doing a pulse survey will help you to know if there's things that people are feeling that they aren't sharing with you. And that's valuable too. Just looking really quickly at the chat, suggestions for flexibility in a school. Yeah, what a great point. Very interesting. I'm going to think on that one. Jill, will you make a note about that question and the individual who shared it? Because I would like to consider what I might be able to recommend there. And it looks like Kim has some thoughts too. That's great. Okay, so this is this piece around pulse surveys. Again, they can look lots of different ways. You can customize them as much as you want to in your organization, but really starting to think about how are we going to get more flexible in our workplace? And it may mean that we need to make an investment in this area in order to be able to compete with the other jobs that are available to our people that are allowing them more flexibility. Many of you probably know whether you've lost employees due to primarily money, or if you've lost any employees that just can't work within the constraints of the organization. Obviously, we cannot adjust and adapt to every one person who might not be able to stay in our organization. But if you are seeing any trends, if you are sensing that there's anything about the structure of how you do the work that is getting in the way of you being able to hire people that you'd love to hire or keep people that are worth a lot to your organization, we've got to start challenging ourselves around flexibility, okay? All right, my friends, so back to these 4 areas. As a reminder, if you're a manager, if you're a leader, I want you to leave this session and ask yourself, even if I'm pretty accessible and involved with my people, where could I engage more, differently, more authentically, right? Often this is just turning the volume up a little bit on something, just a little bit more, 3%, 5%. Ask yourselves, who in our organization is going to think about this wellness piece? Who is going to research this, understand it, and think about how we can be more proactive around wellness in a very meaningful way to our people? Because when our people are not well, our organization suffers, our impact suffers. Third, to determine where you can be flexible, and this one I've just recently talked about. And then we've got this piece on tapping into motivation. I'm really passionate about this topic because it's one of the trickier things for leaders right now, is understanding how to keep our people engaged and on fire about what they're doing. Much of this, I will give you a little teaser to the self-paced video that I'm going to create for all of you on this topic. Much of this has to do with giving our people space and time to actually set goals and think about what they want and why they want it. As we are seeing, our younger generations in particular actually have never had experience with goal setting unless they were in some type of formal team, sports team environment or something like that. Most have never set professional goals for themselves. Many have not set personal goals. I have clients I work with that have me come in and just lead personal and professional goal setting, 2-hour workshop just to help their people get connected to their why. We talk about things like, who's counting on you? And sometimes the answer is myself, right? And sometimes the answer is my family, my children, a grandchild, a spouse, a parent. There are folks I work with who send money to their parents every month, right? Like there are so many things to think about. But when we help our people get out of the operation of clocking in and doing my job every day and you actually give me some time to consider, what is my why? Why am I working? What do I care about? What impact do I want to make? What are my goals? When I can tie that to my role, and I realize that the organization is a vehicle taking me closer to the goals that I have, I'm in. And sometimes we need reminders, and we also need tools and methods to do this, because many of our employees have never learned how to do this. Okay. So that's my little teaser for my bonus content. Jill's going to send out my email. And if you want that self-paced webinar, I'm just going to record it. It'll have slides to it, and it's a short segment. I'll try to keep it 20 minutes or less, all about tapping into motivation. Just shoot me an email and I'll send it out to you and your team. Okay. All right, my friends, we did it. Okay, so here's where you find me. I'm fairly active on Instagram, not as much on Facebook, but you can find me there if that's your jam. I've got my email right here on the screen as well. Just very quickly, just a teaser here for all these sources. I told you, I did my research for you. So if there's anything that I talked about, any of the polls or research studies that you want to learn more about, when the slides get sent out, you can literally just copy and paste and plug any of those into your web browser, and you can read the full reports, articles, things that are there. Okay, I know we want to open it up for questions. So if anybody wants to stick around for questions, that's great. If you need to hop, I just want to thank you for taking the time to spend with us this morning. I really hope that there's a little 1 or 2 gems that you can take away from this presentation. And most of all, I just want to commend you for hanging in there, because this is one heck of a time to be in the nonprofit sector doing the work and sticking it out in really challenging circumstances. So I hope you celebrate often, and I'm totally in your corner. So if I can be of support to anyone, or you have a separate question for me at any point, here's where you find me.
Thank you so much, Karen. It looks like Faye has her hand up, so we can start there. And then we have a couple more questions that came into the chat that we can share after that.
Great. Hi, Faye.
Hi, Karen. It's so nice to kind of sort of meet you. I've heard such great things about you from a lot of people that use you as a coach. So this was a really great session. And I have a question. One of my direct reports, I really want to, I've tried on a number of occasions to really like authentically check in with her and see how she's doing. And maybe I didn't do it the right way, but I have a feeling that she's just always one of those people that just says, oh, it's okay, everything's fine, but I can see it. I mean, she is really struggling with burnout and overwhelm. And I want to know what you think about just starting the conversation at saying, you know, hey, I want to ask you a very direct question. I can see that you are overwhelmed and exhausted and stressed, and I want to talk about it and you know, have a real candid conversation because I want to help, that type of thing. I guess I'm looking for advice, if you're okay, if you would recommend that tactic of just starting out being really blunt and saying, I want to have this conversation. I don't want to, you know.
Yeah, this is such a great question. I'm sure there's other people on that are so glad you asked it. I have so many thoughts. Let me keep it brief. Yes and yes. And here's the thing. I think, yes, I hear you. Whoops, it feels a little echoey. There we go. That you feel it'll be blunt. I have to say, I think this is what direct compassion looks like. That's what it is. So instead of thinking of it like, gosh, I'm going to like get ready, put my armor on here to be blunt, this is actually direct compassion. Right? This is like, if you read anything about Brene Brown, she talks about getting in the arena, right? And not staying on the outside in the bleachers. And often what we're doing is we're dancing around each other. I don't know this person in the scenario exactly, but I will tell you this. I think this is a good thing for us to remember as leaders. Often the people that work for us, whether we've ever said this to them or not, take on the role and responsibility of easing the way for the people they work for. So I noticed this as a manager. My people were very loyal and they worked so hard for themselves and for me and for what the work we were doing collectively. But the truth is, they really viewed a lot of their job as easing the way for me, like almost playing guard and keeping things from impacting me because they saw how intensely busy I was. They saw my emails going out at 11 at night, you know, like I didn't do that well as a manager, by the way. But so sometimes when people are saying, "Oh no, I'm good," like I'm all good, it's not always because they don't realize that they're not. It's just that they don't want to burden us. They're going to handle it themselves and they don't want to slow us down. So I got it, boss. I'm all good. So anything, if this rings a bell at all, you may even want to bring that up in some way, just to remind them, this person, this is my job. My job is to support you. A huge part of my responsibility is to figure out how to remove barriers for you and also to stay in touch with you about your workload and what's working for you and anything that's not working for you, right? Because you can't assess, problem solve unless you have good information. So just make sure that whatever you state, you then make space to just get quiet and let the person show up. I don't know this person, but I will say often when we do this well, direct compassion, you will experience someone having emotions. It's totally okay. Show them that it's okay by just demonstrating and modeling that it's no problem. Thank goodness they're just showing up and letting you know what's really going on, because you can only help remove roadblocks. You can only problem solve when you actually know what's going on.
Thank
Okay,
you.
I hope that's helpful. I'm always happy to talk to you more about it if I haven't nailed it for you.
Thanks.
You bet. Other questions?
We had a question come into the chat, Karen, about PTO in the nonprofit sector. And if there are any sector norms that you know of. It's a nonprofit looking to revisit their PTO policy and want to make sure they're kind of in line with the community in the sector.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't specialize in human resources. I work with a lot of human resource teams in the work that I do as a coach. But I think it's really important that we get data on this that's from the teams that deal with this all the time. If you do not have an HR team that you work with already and you would like me to look into that, I'm happy to reach out to a couple of the teams I use. I love Together HR. Together HR is based out of Big Sky, but they support a lot of organizations in the Gallatin Valley as well. They've got a good sized team, and I think they would be able to give us some data on that one, because they do a lot of consulting with for-profit and nonprofits about exactly this, right? Like how to stay competitive and how to set something up that's reasonable for their organization. I'm going to read this question that's in the chat here. We are a relatively new and growing organization. We doubled our staff size in the last 6 months. Congratulations, that's huge. My question is, when would you anticipate the honeymoon stage might end? When do you think the lack of stress, anxiety, and wellness because of the new employer experience wears off? Oh, this is such a good question, Jason. You know, the bottom line is there's a lot of factors I don't know about that I would want to ask you to determine when do we think we might need to prepare for some of the excitement to wear off. I think what you need to do is check in particular about the pace, not only the pace of the organization, the demands on the organization as you're futuring and you're thinking about what's coming. If your particular area is trending up, and you expect your services to be in high demand, I would encourage you to get as proactive as you can around these pieces so that you don't have people going, wait a minute, what other opportunities are there? This isn't exactly what I thought it was, right? I would also say doing pulse surveys out of the get-go with your organization would be so beneficial, because you'd have a baseline in this honeymoon stage that you're talking about. And then if you're doing a pulse survey twice a year, once a quarter, you'll start to see if certain factors or elements in the organization are shifting, and you can try to get on top of it quicker. I hope that helps. Any other questions?
I have a question, but oops, sorry, I didn't raise my hand.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
It's not fully formed, but when there are different, it's hard. Flexibility is such a great one for us, I think, and we're all learning how to do that better. Or we should be. I hear that, but when you have different types of course employees, say exempt and non-exempt, or different types of expectations on those employees, it's really hard to create systems around or ways to be flexible that don't always work for both types of employees, and how to do that fairly, or how to come up with ways to. Yeah, that's kind of a weird question that I haven't really formed, but do you hear me at all, or do you see what
Totally. Yeah, I think it's great, Jennifer. I mean, part of what you're doing is just normalizing the fact that this is tricky to figure out. What I can't alleviate for you is that you're right. The equity piece of this, it's not apples to apples. But here's what I love about this. Let's just be open about that. Let's just make sure our people know, right? So much of this is about communicating intention clearly. So just making sure our people know this topic is on my mind as a leader, or on our minds as a leadership team. We care about it. We want to do it better. It's tricky. Here's why it's tricky. And we're going to figure it out. And we need some input from you. You need to learn more about what this looks like for you if you're exempt, non-exempt. So I think we need more data. And I think we also have to be really careful. And this may not be your case, Jennifer, but just in general, I want to make the point that let's make sure we're not telling ourselves stories about what people would be okay with or not be okay with, or that everybody else is as worried about it being apples to apples. And when I say apples to apples, I just mean it can't look the same for different types of roles, and that's okay. I think what we mostly want to know is that you recognize it, you want to figure out what's equitable, and you're going to stay in the game until you figure it out, as opposed to, you know what, this is really complicated. I'm not sure when we're going to have time to figure this out. On to the next thing. That's alarming as an employee. Okay, my leaders don't know how to solve this, so they're just going to not focus on it. That would scare the crud out of me right now, especially when it comes to flexibility. So hopefully those suggestions help. And yes, it's not easy. Jill, I'm going to let you call on who's ever next, okay?
Yeah, I also want to do a time check because we're right at the end. So I think we have maybe time for one more. And then if other folks have questions, I will be sending a follow-up email with all of Karen's info, a recording of the session, and all the slides, as well as a survey. So
and I'm always open to, I always say, I mean, I'm a coach, you guys. So if I can answer a question in 15 minutes or less, like bring it on. So just shoot me an email, or, reach out on my contact page on my website, and don't be shy about it. And I'll send you back my thoughts.
Thank you, Karen. I so appreciate that offer. I think Jenny had her hand up first. So I think we can squeeze in one more quick question. And then Barb, if you wouldn't mind emailing Karen, we'd so appreciate it.
Please do.
My question was just on a follow-up for the pulse survey. So let's say I do a 5-question pulse survey. I collect a lot of great information. Then do I make another survey to dig deeper on like things that are low or things that are high? That kind of like, how does that look was my question.
Oh my gosh, what a great question. So glad you asked, Jenny. So there's not one way to do it. And I think that you know your organization best. I love the idea of a follow-up. I do that quite frequently. I don't do that always. Some organizations have their pulse surveys really dialed where they're not necessarily looking to go deeper in that context, they may take the data and then have departmental meetings about some of the results in general so they can learn more from their people. Or you could also do a deeper dive, something that maybe has an overview page that just says, here's some of the things that stood out in the last pulse survey we sent out. We would love to learn more about what you think about these things. So you could ask questions as follow-up, like, if you selected A or B, can you tell us more about why? Right? Or if you
Okay.
didn't choose A or B, tell us more about the factors that are impacting it. So I think absolutely, yes, follow-up pulse surveys are perfectly fine. Another method is to use an all-team meeting or some type of actual in-person event where you share some of the data that you received. I actually think it's really important that we don't forget to tell our people, we got it. Thank you for doing it. Here's what we learned from you. Even if some of the things we learn are not positive, this is how we build trust and rapport. The employees probably talk amongst themselves, so they probably have a good sense of what data they gave you. And so if you show up or you don't show up at all, if you show up and don't say the things you learned that are tough to hear, right? Or you don't show up at all to say, thank you for taking the time to do it. We heard you, and here's some of the things we heard. Don't expect people to engage a lot going forward in any of these types of things, right? But it's also okay. Here's how I might handle it in a group setting. Again, every organization is different, but just for another option, you could also have a team meeting and say, here's some of the themes that came out of our pulse survey. Let's do some small group discussions around these things. So that takes the pressure off of like someone raised their hand in the large group and tell us what you meant on the survey. Instead, it's like, these were two of the things that we think we're doing really well or feeling really good or healthy in our culture. Here were two of the things that rated really low. I've broken you into groups of 4. Here are the questions or the things that I want you to talk about. And then each group report out back to the larger group. And that way it feels safer. And there also is an opportunity to do some problem solving as a group.
Thank you so much, Karen. Everyone, I just want to thank Karen one more time for sharing her expertise and knowledge. Please, if you see her or chat via email, share that gratitude. We are so deeply grateful for your time, Karen, and for each of you who joined today.